Now, when we're talking about chemistry, it's also really important to talk about changes that matter can undergo. And one type of change that matter can undergo, or one of the two types, is physical changes. So physical changes are basically what happens when the particles that make up the matter, they don't change at all. So this is a really great example here of a physical change. And what I've got is on one side, I've got some solid, maybe let's call it orange juice. I've got some solid orange juice. On the other side, I've got some liquid orange juice. Importantly, it's still orange juice, so it hasn't changed. But these two things are clearly very different. So one is a solid block and the other is a liquid. A physical change, a great example of a physical change, is a change of state. So you can see here, when I apply heat to my solid, it turns into a liquid, but it's still orange juice. So orange juice as a solid, if I heat it, it turns into a liquid. It's a different thing. It looks different. It behaves differently. You can pour a liquid. You can't pour a solid. If you get hit with an ice ball, it'll probably hurt. Whereas someone tipped a glass of orange juice on you, it wouldn't hurt. You'd probably be a bit uncomfortable. So they're very different, but they're made of the same things. So a physical change is a change that occurs when there's been a change, but the particles that make up the two things remain the same. Another example of a physical change is, of course, freezing. So when I get liquid orange juice and I freeze it, I can turn it back into a solid material here, so the isopol, but it's still orange juice. So there's two types of physical changes. Other physical changes are breaking a glass. You can actually melt glass and get it back together. It's quite easy to fix broken glass. Scrunching up a bit of paper and then unfolding it again. You can dissolve something. You can dissolve salt in water, and it's quite easy to get the salt back out of the water. So that's one type of change. So a physical change is one that the two things, the particles that make up the material or the matter don't change. And it's quite easy to go between them. So this one, you could just heat it and cool it and heat it and cool it. You could make that change over and over again really easily. The other type of change in chemistry is something called a chemical change. And what happens here is the actual particles that make up the thing do change. So a great example, and one that I'd actually recommend you try at home, so convince your parents to try at home, is get some vinegar. You just buy it from the shop. Just buy a bottle of vinegar. And get some bicarb soda or bicarbonate of soda, or baking soda it's sometimes called, and mix them together. It's actually really good fun. You get a whole lot of bubbles formed. And those bubbles, so here's a whole lot of bubbles, those bubbles are a new thing. They're carbon dioxide gas. So I can start with a liquid vinegar and a solid bicarb of soda, and I can make bubbles of carbon dioxide, a gas. So I can make what's called a chemical change. And a chemical change is a change which makes something new. So the carbon dioxide over here, that wasn't in either of these two things. We've changed it. So we've had a chemical change. And if I just got some carbon dioxide, it'd be really hard to turn it back into vinegar or bicarb of soda. So it's because a chemical reaction has taken place. Chemical changes are also, they're really hard to reverse. So that's what that means. Great examples of chemical changes are things like chemical reactions like this, but also burning. If you burn some wood or burn some paper, it's really hard to get the ash that's left over back to wood or paper. It's really, really hard to do. That's because you've made something new. You burn wood, you actually make ash and you make a bit of carbon dioxide. So chemical changes, you make a new substance and they're really hard to reverse.